Welcome back to Beyond the Hyphen. Today, we have a very special guest joining us. He has spent years in the public education sector, spending time working with students at all levels of schooling, and now serves as the principal of one of the top public high schools in the entire country. This episode will give us a deep dive into the life and journey of a public educator and administrator, my very own principal, Dr. John DiFato, with insights and stories shaped by lived experiences as well as his very own journey as a student. Tune in as we chat about the public education system, how the different roles in public education deliver vastly diverse yet critical purposes for our communities, and explore the range of challenges that the education system often faces from the unique perspective of a student teacher turned administrator. Welcome, Dr. DiFato. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you. I appreciate the invite, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
So just to start us off, for those who aren't familiar, Dr. DiFato, can you give us a really brief introduction of your story, who you are, and what you do?
Sure. So currently I'm the proud principal of River Hill High School, and going into my second year as principal. It was a great year last year. I'm looking forward to an even better year this year. And this is starting my 16th year in education. I started way back in 2009, 2010 as a student teacher at River Hill. So I got to student teach there for a year while I was working on my master's from the University of Maryland, College Park, and then was fortunate enough to get hired at River Hill. And so I taught here for 8 years as a social studies teacher, teaching a whole variety of levels of world history, psychology, AP classes, and just getting involved in every aspect of school. So I coached 3 seasons. I was the SGA sponsor, doing whatever I can to kind of promote student voice and just help kids find an outlet at school. High school kids spend so much time at school, sometimes more than at home. So they have to see themselves in school. And as educators working in a high school, I think it is our job to find a place for that. So was involved in a lot of things at school, just loved being there. And then in 2017, 2018, I was promoted to an assistant principal at Hammond High School. So I left River Hill, went to Hammond High School for 5 years. Interesting 5 years for my first stint as AP. We had a whole building renovation. So while they were working in parts of the building, we were in other parts of the building. And then we'd move in the middle of the year. So it just made for an interesting couple years. And then on top of that was COVID. So I got to experience the shift to virtual learning. And then after 5 years at Hammond High School, I moved to Reservoir High School for a year, and then was asked to be principal at River Hill. And so here's where I'm at now. During my time as both in the classroom and as an administrator, I continued my education. So I went back to school for my ANS, or Administration Supervision Certificate. After I finished that, I went for a second master's of education in educational technology from Loyola. Mm-hmm. And then after that, the same year I moved to Hammond, I enrolled in a doctoral program at the University of Maryland, College Park for school systems leadership. Finished that, and at least for the foreseeable future, I'm done. There might be some other opportunities out there, but I think for now I'm done, and just looking forward to throwing all my energy into this role and to River Hill and the community.
Yeah, it sounds great. I don't think there's a lot of teachers out there who become administrators, but not many have taught as a student teacher and then became a teacher and then later became the principal or another administrative role at the same high school. And I think that's really unique and says a lot about how much you love the community here. We can get into, what you've done, what your current goals are a little bit later, but I want to start with what originally drew you into the education field. Straight right out of high school and then into college, out of college. What drew you into education and why is it important to you?
Sure. What drew me into education, or when did I say, I'm going to become a teacher? I couldn't tell you. It's always been what I wanted to do. So I was one of those that knew what I was applying to college for. I knew I was applying for education and history. There was never really any doubt. Um, Maybe I can trace it back to my fifth grade social studies teacher, Mr. Eckenrode, as kind of, inspiring that journey. Not sure, but there was really never any doubt that I was going to be a high school history teacher. So applying to college, that was easy. I didn't really have, I went in knowing I was going to be history and education dual major. And then, Maryland had the master's integrated program. So I did that. But never really any doubt. And I just think education's important. I think we got to spend a lot of time setting up the next generation for the future. And I think if we're asking kids to learn every day, that we have to model that. And so I try to be a lifelong learner. I try to promote it in teachers. I try to promote it in students. And so I try to promote it in myself. And I think of my 15 years in education, there's probably only been two where I was not actively enrolled in a higher education class. And then in those years, definitely was involved in other professional learning. And the world is changing and we have to change with it. And we have this unique chance to not prepare students for the world today, but really for the unknown, the world tomorrow. We don't know what it's going to bring. 5 years ago, AI wasn't even a conversation in the secondary high school level.
Mhm.
And now it's everywhere. It's pervasive. We're talking about it, how to deal with it. Are we trying to combat it? Or are we trying to teach kids how to use it appropriately? So I'm just trying to stay on top of that. In fact, I just shared a email with with our team leaders about an article on AI. I was listening to a podcast the other day on my run called The Cult of Pedagogy, and she had a guest host that talked all about like what we should be doing about AI in schools and stop trying to combat it, but embrace it and kind of teach kids and teachers how to work with it and use it. And so, yes, it's summer break and the ITLs are on summer, and I respect that. But if I'm going to consider myself a lifelong learner, I believe it's my job to kind of share that with them. So just send a quick email saying, here's a podcast I listen to. If you want to listen to it, great. If not, here's a summary. Yeah, I think I moved away from the original question there. Sorry.
No, it's okay. And now you're on our podcast. We get to inherit your awesome insights. You talked about being enrolled into higher education classes while being involved in the capacity as a teacher or as an administrator in these public schools. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that was like, the balance? Did you feel like you were applying what you were learning directly into the everyday with your students and colleagues?
Good question. Yes and no. For example, I'm thinking back to the educational technology program I was in. I valued and got a lot out of some of it, but I also felt some of it was outdated. Like one of our entire first classes, so for an entire semester, was on the basics of HTML coding, which sure is important, but gone are the days of like Netscape Navigator and true HTML coding. Coding has moved to such a different level. And yes, you have to understand the basics, but I just felt like our time was wasted in that. And I think that's a kind of a microcosm of where we are in education sometimes, that the content or the way that we're teaching sometimes is not evolving with the times.
Mhm.
And it's something that we have to make sure that we're doing. When I was in my doctoral program, I found that was a lot more focused on contemporary issues, a lot more, what's going on today, or how do we, prepare educators for forward thinking rather than being reactive. Um, but I think that is one of the big issues in education is constantly evolving with the times and trying to stay ahead of the times, because it's a lot of work. Planning and prepping lessons is a lot of work. And so it is nice if you can kind of recycle or reuse some stuff from previous years, but then you can sort of get into a rut where you're not being innovative. And so it's finding that balance of, this has worked in the past, but this is the skill I see students are lacking this year, or students have come in with this skill, so I can skip this whole unit. And so it's just staying on top of it. And I think that is tricky for all levels of education, be it the high school level, the undergrad level, the graduate level.
You talked about earlier that, you sort of, not a hierarchy, but you went through this process of getting more and more education, getting more and more hands-on experience in the classroom, and now you're an administrator. So my next question, taking into context what we just discussed, is how do you think that your experiences in the classroom with your students translated into the way that you operate as a principal now?
Good question, and kind of a trick question, because I think half of it had to do with my experiences in the classroom, but a large part of who I am as a building leader, as an instructional leader, are because of a lot of my experiences outside of the classroom, the coaching, the sponsoring SGA, the planning school-wide events, the fostering student voice, because that's a large part of what makes a school tick. And what large part of that stuff is what makes kids want to come to school and want to enjoy their school and want to come to the NHS coffee house or the Friday night lights games or basketball games. So I think my experience outside of the classroom really shaped who I am as a building leader and instructional leader more than my experience in the classroom. Another part of that is being a social studies teacher, and within the humanities, and I guess all contents can say they do this, but we really got to focus on both the skills and the content. So it's not just, teaching about the significance of the date 1066 in Western European history, but it's the skills that come behind analyzing documents, corroborating sources, and that's stuff we have to look at today. We talk about in social studies historical thinking skills, and kids being able to contextualize and corroborate sources. Well, that's great. Can you take two primary sources and either compare them or put them in context? Okay, but can you take that skill, take it outside the social studies classroom, and put it into TikTok or put it into social media? If you see one post, do you believe it right away? Or do you say, let me see if I can corroborate that information? Or do you put it into context of what's the hidden bias? What's the perspective of the author? And how could that influence what he's trying to say or what they're trying to put out there? So I try to keep that in mind. And then in terms of where I am as a building leader now, a big part of it is I was not a classroom teacher during the pandemic and virtual learning and post-pandemic. And I try to remember that. The classroom is very different. When I was in the classroom, we didn't have one-to-one. I still remember when cell phones were just becoming, oh my God, I'm dating myself here. When cell phones were just becoming kind of pervasive in the classroom and teachers were left to decide, in their classroom, is it no cell phones, or cell phones have to be face down in the corner of the desk, or I don't care if you have it when it's downtime. And now we've kind of come full circle in this county with, can't be seen, can't be heard during the school day. So I do try to keep in mind that I have not been in the classroom in the past 5 or 6 years, and those have been the amount of change that we've seen in classroom instruction has been astronomical. You just look at kids and their attention span. Kids can't sit for 20 minutes, let alone 5 minutes.
Hmm.
You're scrolling on TikTok 40 seconds. Kids get to an Instagram reel, it's 3 minutes, and they're scrolling after 30 seconds because they're on to the next thing. And so it's, I like working with teachers on how do we take what we used to do and augment it for the kids in front of us today. But I think it's important that I recognize I don't have that experience. And so that's why I try to get into classrooms as much as possible. Anytime there's a break of 30 minutes to an hour on my schedule, I pop into a classroom. It's not the same as, teaching every day in front of the kids, and I recognize that, but I try to make myself available to have conversations with teachers and our team leaders about curriculum, about pedagogy, about assessment as much as possible. And just recognizing that it is constantly evolving, and we're asking teachers to do more and more, and we're providing with them with less and less resources.
Yeah, for sure. The lack of resources has been a concern in where we live, Maryland, for a long time. And the amount of initiative that we see kids taking is steadily going up. And so that's something we can be optimistic about. Um, Kind of going back on your role now as an administrator, you said you're going into your second year here at uh, your current high school, River Hill. Um, you know, aside from the things we talked about earlier, sending emails, popping into the classroom whenever you can you give us a breakdown of some of the things, what the day of a principal looks like? For our audience out there, as a public school principal, what do you have to do on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. I'll be careful not to generalize it for everyone, but I can kind of run through my day. There really is no typical day. For me, I try to get to school early in the morning. Most days, I'm in the building before 5 a.m. And school, as you know, starts at 7:50. I try to get outside at 7:20 and be at the car loop every morning, greeting parents and students. I stand there for about 20 minutes, and then I move to the side of the building and greet the juniors and seniors that drive as they come in. But the reason I get to school so early in the morning is that's my time to really catch up on emails, catch up on paperwork, write observations, provide feedback, and just do a lot of the paperwork, so that during the school day between the hours of 7:50 and 2:35, I could be out and about. I try very hard not to be in my office during the school day. Now, if I have meetings and stuff, I can't avoid. I have them, but I try very hard to kind of handle the other stuff uh, before school. And that way, after school, I could attend meetings, or I can pop in on clubs or go to different sporting events. And then during the day, I try to keep my calendar, my personal, or I guess my school calendar, to the bell schedule, to just stay in tune with what everyone else in the building's going through. Because it's so easy to schedule a meeting for 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, but that doesn't align with the bell schedule. So I schedule meetings from like 7:50 to 8:45. So from 8:45 to 8:50, I could be in the hallways during the class change.
Mm.
That's important to me, that I'm out and about and present. One, it helps me keep a pulse on a school, on the climate culture. Teachers, I can check in with teachers, I can check in with students. So I try very hard to be in the hallways during class changes. In fact, my entire admin team knows that if our admin meeting runs long, when that bell rings, we're going to take a break, we're going to pause, take a lap, and come back. And throughout the day, I'll handle some meetings. We have different standing meetings every week. We have some instructional team leader meetings. We have student support team meetings that just happen kind of once a week. And then it's whatever meetings pop up. It depends on the time of the year, beginning of the year, we have goal setting meetings with teachers. Then we have observations as you get into the middle part of the year. But as I shared earlier, anytime I have more than a break, usually between 30 minutes or an hour, and I'm just don't have anything on my calendar, I find a classroom to go into. And sometimes I engage. Sometimes I just kind of sit and just watch, just kind of try to get a pulse on what's going on, seeing what our kids are doing, seeing what our teachers are doing. And I don't go in looking for anything. It's not a gotcha. I'm just trying to see what's going on. I want to see what our kids are doing. I love walking into classrooms where students are engaging with each other, or engaging actively with the content or skills of of that class. There's a time and a place for lecture. Sure, I'm not saying it should never happen. I know I did it. There's a time and a place for it, but we also, I think, as educators, need to be fostering collaboration. Need to get kids talking to each other. Need to get kids problem solving with each other. Teach them this, but then here, now you have this information. Do something with it. Produce something. Synthesize it somehow.
Yeah.
So get into the classrooms, and then it's just deal with things as they pop up. And they pop up all the time. I get home at the end of the day and I'm asked, how was your day? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is fine, because I honestly cannot remember, all the different things that happened throughout the day. Sometimes when I look at my calendar, there's, 20 different things on there, all within 10 to 15-minute increments, just because it's short, quick conversations, checking in with people, and just dealing with stuff as it arises. But being present, being out around, knowing teachers, knowing students, I think helps be proactive and stay ahead of a lot of stuff.
Yeah, being in that mindset that you have, Dr. DiFato, where you try to minimize the time that you're in your office, where frankly students and teachers don't really can't see you very much. And I think that concept of being as visual, as available to your students as possible is something that, whether the students know it or not, can impact how they view the school culture, the teachers, the administration that they interact with. That visualization, that availability, plays a lot into a student's school life. There's always this conversation about public education versus private education. I want to know, from your vantage point, from your experiences, what do you think are the unique strengths that you've noticed and observed in the public school environment, and what challenges also might come with them?
Sure. I want to start with putting my bias out there. Is I only know public education. I went through public education in Montgomery County Public Schools. I went to a public university, and now I work in public schools now. So I can really only speak to that. And in terms of what I think are some benefits and values to it, is the diversity that you find yourself with in a public school. Not just diversity in terms of race and ethnicity, but socioeconomic status, political ideology, all of that. And so you find yourself in a classroom with people with different upbringings, people that have different types of conversations around the dinner table, people that grow up with Fox News on the TV, people that grow up with CNN on the TV, MSNBC. And so they're coming in, whether they know it or not, with their perspective, bias, whatever you want to call it. And so if structured correctly, it provides a great opportunity for conversation, for engaging with each other, for learning from each other. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen in the private school setting. Again, I don't know much about it, but I'm going to believe that you get a lot more diversity from in the public school setting. And again, diversity in all the realms, not just race, ethnicity, but all of them. What are some challenges? Budget's always a challenge. Everyone wants more and more, but we get less and less resources to do things with. Um, the current political climate, uh, and in terms of where we're going with, with public education, with academic freedom, it's kind of hard to keep up with everything that's going on. Is the Department of Education going to be around? Is it not? Can it be dismantled? Can it not? Supreme Court rulings. What can parents opt in and opt out of? Do they affect the high school level? Title VI, Title VII, Title IX. How do all those play a role? And so it's just keeping on top of them. And I don't want to trivialize it by saying it's a lot of noise, but that's a lot of up here. And it is important because we have to abide by laws. But as long as we can focus on what's going on in the building, as long as we can, I think we can focus on encouraging discourse and civil conversation and providing kids resources to find and create and determine their own opinion and then be able to articulate that opinion in a respectable way. I think that's what we're here for. Yeah, we're here to teach the basics, arithmetic, reading, writing, but also it's how to be a productive citizen, lowercase c, and just be productive in the out in the world and be respectful of others.
We discussed you discussed the budget problem that unfortunately many public schools suffer from. Particularly, we can see in our county of Howard County, we're seeing less and less money to provide for instructional materials for teachers, for sports programs, for extracurricular clubs, and we can attribute that to the trickling down effect from all the way from the federal government down to the state to the local governments. And frankly, no matter where your county is ranked, right, the impact of the lack of budget does not discriminate. I want to get a better grasp of what it's like to really be on the ground, to interact with the teachers. What's it like to hear their stories? What's it like to hear their thoughts on, better or for worse, the budget crisis, what they can do about it? How do teachers interact with each other on the local ground? I think it gets overlooked very often.
Yeah. I'm not an expert on the budget. I'm not an expert on policy. I'm not an econ major, any of that. But you think about just the county and it's only a pie, right? Everyone wants a piece of the pie. And if you give more to one, you're taking away from others. And so it's just where are the priorities and where are the needs in that, for that given fiscal year. On top of that, you have inflation that is just increasing the price of everything. And so there's just a lot of factors that play a role. And then on top of that, if you take a county that maybe has declining enrollment, that's going to factor because you're getting less money because you get per pupil expenditure. Or even within the county, if you're having redistricting or if families aren't moving out of a district, then that enrollment's going down. So there's so many factors that play a role, and there's a lot of noise out there because these days, a lot of the information that you get regarding local politics, budget, whatever, is from social media, where everyone has a voice and everyone thinks they know everything, and they can write what they want. And so it's just there's a lot of information out there. It's hard to keep up with what's accurate, what's not accurate, what's has a certain spin on it, what has a different spin on it. And so, yeah, teachers just like me get to hear stuff from social media. And sometimes we hear from social media before we hear from anything else. And I try to stay on top of it as much as I can so I can answer questions. but a lot of times I don't have the answer. And so it's kind of, sometimes my role is just listening to a teacher, um, share their concerns or share their frustrations, and then um, seeing if there is a guidance or a solution to give them. But teachers are all over the place with what they know. Some are involved, some aren't. Some aren't involved until it impacts them, and then they want to get all involved. Um, but they're all over the place. This past year was, a difficult one because of the budget process was drawn out, and that's just the way it is in this county. The timeline set up between uh, the school system and the county and their timeline. It just makes things happen a little later
Mhm.
than other counties. And then you had a lot of factors. There's less money coming from the federal government. There's less money coming from the state because of different deficits or policies. Then the county has their pie and they're allocating that money. But then on top of that, different schools, you have really shifting enrollments. We're coming off year 3 of redistricting, and I know some schools are looking at another one coming down the pipe, which impacts that in terms of staffing. So there are just a lot of factors, and so it was kind of just a drawn out year in terms of budget, and um, we're, I think, in a unique place as a school system
Mhm.
because we're a bunch of schools in the county. Um, I think the model for the large majority of schools in this country are really like townships, or they have one high school, 1 or 2 middle schools, and 3 or 4 elementary schools, and it's like a direct feeder, and they have a board of ed for that high school. That's like the New Jersey model, the New York model, stuff like that. But we are one of the larger school systems in the country, right? We pale in comparison to LA Unified and New York and all of that, but we are still one of the larger ones with just under 60,000 kids and 72, 3, 4 schools. So we are a very large school system, and we focus on being a school, right? We are River Hill. You're a River Hill student versus a River Hill teacher, but also you are a Howard County student and a Howard County teacher and a Howard County school. And so the school then is then looking at, the system is looking at allocating stuff across the school system and not just the school. So you have those 2 different levels that you're trying to put together, and it just adds for another layer. And sometimes that just adds for more delay and more confusion.
Yeah, there's absolutely, I agree, a lot of different factors that play into uh, how the infinite number of things work in a school system, and even more so for a public school system where the demographics, like you said, are so diverse. There's so many different demands from the parents, the kids, the education professionals, and then there's the board of education. It's not very tailored to just one specific pipeline, like you said, the New Jersey or New York model. We have one board of education for, like you said, 70, however, schools. Um, I kind of want to dive into a little bit more the student experience, how student success is measured as someone leading a rather high performing high school, public high school. What does success look to you beyond the test scores, the rankings, the standardized metrics? How do you see a thriving school environment?
That's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up, because success is so much more than the MD report card or the AP scores or the niche.com school rankings or US News and World Report. I mean, there's so many rankings out there, and they all serve their purpose as long as you know what goes into them. Um, Academics absolutely is a large part of that success. And yeah, we have a lot of high performing individuals. In fact, AP scores just came out. And one of the things I've done in my tenure as an administrator is I go through each of the contents, and I've done this for years now. I email all the teachers individually. Hey, your scores came out. I'm sure you saw them. Uh, 95% of your students passed with this many fours and fives. Great job. Keep up the good work. Looking forward to seeing, where it goes in the future. And just looking at that, the amount of, what 26 different AP tests or something like that. The amount of contents where we had a 90+% pass rate was just insane.
Mhm.
I mean, some of them, AP chemistry, I think, with 3 sections, so looking at like 80 kids, was 100% pass rate. It's crazy, and that's a lot. Kudos to the teachers, kudos to the students, for being invested and for going the extra mile and putting the time in. But scores aren't everything. AP scores aren't everything. SAT scores, college acceptance rate, PSAT scores, that Maryland report card, all that stuff, is not the end all be all. The Maryland report card is one that I think shows a larger variety of information. So it actually takes into account student voice. I don't know if you remember, but we ask the students to fill out a climate survey every year around April, and that actually goes into the Maryland report card. And schools now are ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars.
Mhm.
And that's just a small percentage of it, of the ranking. Attendance goes into that, success on the English and science and math assessments goes into that, and different factors. So that's all one side of success. But I consider a successful school and successful student body, students who take pride in their school, students who want to be involved in their school, students who find success and want to share that success in more than just the academic arena. Is the gym full on a Friday night basketball game in the winter? Do we have a sellout dance for homecoming or prom? Do we have kids, beating down the door to come to a SGA town hall so they can share their opinion because they know that their voice is valued? Do we have students that give back? Do we have students that are looking for opportunity to mentor other students or want to work with our incoming freshmen and share their experience? Do we have graduates that want to come back and sit on college panels with juniors and seniors to talk about the application process or the college process? And I think we're fortunate enough that we do have a lot of that. I think we have a lot of students who enjoy being here, who enjoy spending their time here, who enjoy coming back and sharing their experience. But we can do more, because we have 1,300 plus kids at this school, and each of them, their voice is important, and we need to create a space for that. Are we sharing our students' culture at school? We have a Black History Month assembly and Hispanic Month assembly, and thanks to you, now we're going to have a API Month assembly coming up next year. And so, are we finding ways and allowing space to share culture with our students and with the school community? And I think that's a really big part of what makes a successful school. Do you have the students who are proud to be at that school, proud to share their culture, feel comfortable sharing their culture? And then do you have teachers who are proud to be at that school and want to support our students and want to help them? Because all these after school stuff, all these after school clubs and activities and assemblies and productions and concerts can't happen if teachers are not there to coach or sponsor or conduct. So I think that's a big part of it too. Do you have teachers who are willing to go above and beyond their contractual time to give back? So to me, all those are metrics of a successful and a successful school.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, a school's success is defined much more, much more than just the scores that the kids get, the scores that the school gets by these so many different rankings, and the student teacher relationship. I think a lot of attention has been put into managing and encouraging the students to interact with the teachers. And I think that's really great and something that every school should focus on. Back to you, Dr. DeFato. As we wind down with the last few questions, I'm curious from your experiences, the challenges that you've, observed or faced, the good things that you've experienced, um, how education works and functions for who it serves, the students, the community, at a policy or even just structural level, social level. What areas would you focus on if you could change just one or two things that you experience?
Good question. I don't know. Um, I would really like to see a paradigm shift away from scores and grades and more towards focus on the learning and the skills and content. So often, kids get a test back or an essay back, and all they care about is the mark at the top. Is it an A? Is it an 89? Is it a 99? And they don't look at any of the comments that the teacher wrote.
Yeah.
Um, Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think it's this focus on grades and where I can sit here and put procedures in place. And I mean, there's different theories out there about standards based grading versus performance grading, and basically it's a check, you got the standard, or no, you did not, redo it.
Mm-hmm.
But we are so entrenched, especially in this community, over grades. Is it an A? And if it's not if it's an 89, it's not oh man, what concept did I miss, or can I relearn it? It's what can I do to get the A? Can you bump me up? Or what can I do to get the B? And it's been that way, since I've been here. It's about the grade. So I would love, and I don't know the answer. I don't know how to do this because I don't know if it's the teachers, the parents, the kids, um, or if it's all of us. But to move away from just the focus on just the grade and actually spend time with the gaining the understanding and the applying that knowledge or that skill to produce something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even in college, it's the same way. It's less about what you produce and more about the grade you get. I wish we can spend more time on the learning and the journey there. And there's so many different things and articles and concepts out there. And do you forego a lot of summative assessment and do the formative assessment where it's a check minus or no check, and then but if you go into a class and 3 weeks in you don't have a grade, you're like, what's my grade? Your parents are like, what's your grade? It's not what you learn, it's what's your grade. So I think that's the one thing I would like to change, and I have no idea where or how to start with that. I think it does start with shifting the culture of feedback and really creating a foundation for feedback where that feedback is more substantive, and less about the number, more about I really like what you did here. Here's how you can improve, and here's why. But that takes time.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but this sort of number focused, letter focused mindset, either directly or indirectly causes students to forget what they learn right after they learn it. Just shooting for that grade, like you said, they don't read the teacher's comments.
Yep. No, absolutely. You look at you cram for your midterm, you take your midterm, and oh my gosh, heaven forbid those questions on your final. You're like, hey, that was first semester stuff. I don't know that anymore. Um, so yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Zooming out of the academic conversation that we've been having, looking back at your career in education so far, what's been the most rewarding moment for you, if you can find one, just one, or maybe more than one in your journey as an educator or administrator? Was there a moment where you thought, this is exactly why I do what I do?
Yep, easy. anytime a student came back and said thank you, whether it was a thank you for writing a college, a letter recommendation, I got into X school, whether it was just a thank you card at the end of the year, or at the end of a season, if it was thank you for coaching, no gift, you know just the letters, just the thank you cards. um that's it. Back when I was teaching, I was writing 20, 30 plus letters of recommendation a year, and each year I could count on one hand the amount of kids that would let me know what college they got into and say thank you. And that that's really it. And then the kids that come back, or the parents that come back that you see, and just hey, my kid still talks about this lesson, or still talks about you and what they learned from you. That's really powerful. But I don't know a teacher who doesn't have that drawer. I don't know what you want to call it, rainy day drawer, smile drawer, whatever, but a drawer where they have a folder of thank you cards or thank you letters. Um, every teacher I know has one. And on days where it's just not a good day or a bad week, or the hits keep coming, it's just nice to kind of go back to that and kind of get grounded in why we do what we do.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. A little action like that for sure goes a long way.
Mhm.
As we, wrap up, my last question to you, Dr. DiFato, is when you're not, walking the halls, sitting in a million meetings, how do you unwind? You said you love uh, running. Any hidden hobbies or favorite things to do to recharge for the next day?
I don't want to say no, because that makes it look like, I just work. I do enjoy work. But I do find time for myself. So lately, as I shared, I'm prepping for a marathon in the fall. So that time right now, from 4 a.m. to 5:30, whatever, it's just me running. It is nice. And I switch it up. Sometimes I just mindlessly listen to a Peloton run, and it's just some music. Um, Other times I listen to education podcasts. And sometimes I listen to various history podcasts and just zone out while I'm running. And then, so that's my morning. And then at the end of the day, I try really hard between 5 and 7 to really just be present at home. I got a 5-year-old at home. Um, right now it's, will you play with me? And every time he asks, I try to make sure I can, because that's going to stop at some point. So I want to make sure that I'm taking advantage of that when I can. And then go to bed early and start it all up the next day. Um, on the weekends, depending on the season, we like to support Maryland athletics. So we go to football games and basketball games at College Park. Um, and every once in a while, I try to take a trip up to New York and check out a Broadway show.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's work. It's working.
I mean, work if you love it. Hey, it's
Yep.
it's a recharge in itself.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, really props to all of our educators out there, to our audience who listens. The school systems running our students. I think all of it is taken for granted by a lot of people, only until years later when we look back to see what we really gained, and that period of digestion sometimes takes longer than it should be. But every person, it's very different. Education still serves the same purpose for us. Dr. DiFato, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. It's been incredibly meaningful to hear your experiences, your perspective. It's so amazing to see how you talked about staying grounded in the bigger picture, bigger purpose of education, and we're just so grateful for your dedication to this community.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And, thanks for having me. It was great spending time with you this afternoon, getting to talk through some things, and, think about some of the questions you asked. And I was happy to share my perspective. So thank you.
And that wraps up today's episode with Dr. John DiFato, a real snapshot into the heart of public education. This conversation offered a window into the everyday life of a local educator rooted in his community, growing alongside it, and giving back with quiet consistency. These are the voices that too often go unheard, our local heroes, but shape the fabric of public life more than we realize. As always, this has been Beyond the Hyphen. I'm Mark Lee, your host. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.